Welcome to Grape Masters, and today we're in Rioja. Actually, it's the first recording here out of a number of recordings. We're talking to a bodega that has a nice name and a famous name, Bodegas Muga, and our guest, Manu. Can I say Manu?
Yes,
Manuel.
of course. Manuel, Manu, yes.
He's going to tell us all about this amazing winery. So the story about the family, but also the history. But we're also talking about the future and the present. So we're in Christmas spirits. There's 3 ghosts of Christmas. And let's see what the conversation takes us today.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you for having us here. We had a nice tour, so we saw the facilities. And one of the first things that stands out is the words wood and oak. It's not only here, but in Rioja. But I think with you, oak is very important, correct?
Yes, it's very important. I will say that in Bodegas Muga something different is that we prefer to work only with oak. Mm-hmm. If we think about how we produce our red wines, even for the fermentation, of course, we use wooden cask. You know,
yeah. So no stainless steel, no cement.
No cement, no stainless steel. We know that they're also very good. The cement and the stainless steel, but in Bodegas Muga we prefer to use oak. Mm-hmm. That is why we need to have our coopery.
Yeah,
you know,
which we saw. It was also very impressive to see how you make your own barrels, basically, because that's what the coopery does. Correct?
Yes,
it's more than making barrels.
It's not only because it's very important for us to produce our own barrels, because then we have the possibility to control the quality of the oak that we buy. Mm-hmm. Something also quite important is to control also the time that we dry the oak, that is a natural dry, you know, and in some way also to control the kind of toast that we want to give to our barrels. But it's also very important for us to have the coopery to maintain and to renew the big wooden cask.
So it needs changes sometimes, or let's say a repair or whatever needs to be done. It's not like you make it and then it's finished.
Yeah. We need to maintain that. That is very important. You know, if we talk about the different kind of job that we can find in a coopery, we're talking about 2 kinds of job. Mm-hmm. One is the job of the cooper. Yeah. That's meaning the man who maintain, or who produce, and who repair, maintain the barrels. And I don't know how is exactly the name of it in English. Maybe master cooper. Yeah. We say in the Spanish language we say cubero. Uh-huh. That means the men who know how to maintain and how to produce a big wooden cask. Okay. The wooden cask.
So these are the really big ones, not the smaller ones that you use for the aging.
Yeah. The barrels is the small ones. The big one is the one that we use to store or to make the fermentation. Blah 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 blah. It's 2 different techniques, if you want, 2 different kind of job.
And we'll talk more about the cooperage and all that and the importance of wood and oak. But before we go, as we already are getting into the deep, maybe we start a little bit introduction about yourself, and then we go into how Bodegas Muga started.
Okay, I am part of the 3rd generation. We are 7 members in my generation. I am the older one. Mm-hmm. I reached the winery beginning of the 90s. But the winery is a familiar winery. Yeah. It was my grandfather and my grandmother, both. They founded the winery in 1932. Mm-hmm. You know, in quite a difficult moment, because after 32, you know, between 36 and 39, we had the Spanish Civil War.
So you're just getting started, and then the Civil War came.
Yeah. Then I think it was a very difficult moment, but in some way, that was something great for this generation, was that they founded the winery and they keep open the business. That was very important, you know.
Yeah. So it wasn't the easy time, but maybe because of the fact that it was not easy, it helped them to see challenges or problems in a different way. Because, if you've gone through this, then other things maybe are easier to accept. Because, in a wartime, things are extreme, of course.
Extremely difficult.
Yeah. And then the generations come. So take us a little bit through the time until we're doing what we're here now.
We say in Spain, I suppose it's the same thing in your country, that the first generation is the one who start the business, who open the business, if you want. The second one is the one who grow the business. Yeah. and the third one is the one who seek the boat. But no, really we are very, very happy with the evolution of our business. I think the second generation they started to produce not only to sell, they started to make the brand.
Yeah.
To make the brand because they.
So besides making great wine, they started to think about what the brand name and Muga means.
Yeah.
Also for the people.
Yeah, but I say that the second generation they started to bring the brand Muga, because they started to bottle the wine and to how do you say etiquetar, label the wine, you know. Yeah. And then I think they make a great job in the Spanish market.
So it's about recognition. People now have a picture with the wine.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then they made the second generation. I think they made a great job in the Spanish market. If you want, they started to do a little bit of job in the export market.
Yep.
But I will say that our generation is the one who make the name of Muga more international.
So what was the time where you started to increase in the export? Around which time are we talking now?
I would say we started to grow in the export end of the 80s, more beginning of the 90s, if you want.
Yeah,
you know,
so already quite some decades now. But
a few decades, yeah. We can say that Spanish market for us at this moment is about 0.5% of our business.
Okay.
The other half is the export market.
So it's quite diversified. Spreading the risk also a little bit, because if you're depending on one country, and even if it's your own country, there is always a risk, of course, that things will change, or some other producer might do a different job or a better job. Better is always arbitrary, because white wine, no bottle is the same anyway. So, okay. And your role at the moment with the winery, what do you do day to day?
Day to day,
it's not day to day. It's like also evening and night. Probably it does not stop.
I do a little bit everything, but I am more focused mainly in sales, marketing, and public relations.
Yeah,
this is my main job.
Yeah,
you know.
We remember seeing you in the Netherlands with your importer, wine import Bart, and presenting the wines there at the anniversary tasting. Yeah. So these are the things where you
anniversary. I think it was this year in June.
Correct.
Beginning of June.
It
was a beautiful event.
Yeah.
We had been working with Import J. Bart since I don't remember exactly, but more than 40 years.
Okay, so we're one of the early export partners as well.
Yeah.
And
I think we have started in the 80s. I don't remember exactly which year, but
so long-standing relationship. When we did a tour before, and we also saw all these nice plaques on the wall with all the importers from around the world. So it shows easily how much partners that you have, and you, having a relationship for 30 or 40 years is not easy, because a lot of things can happen in 30, 40 years, of course.
Completely agree. But I think we feel our importers like a part of our family. You know? That is very important.
Include
for
them
us
in the
also,
family,
no?
basically.
Because at the end, they represent and they sell Muga wines. But in this case, for us, they are part of our family. They are our great ambassadors. You know?
Yeah, they are the ones in touch with the market what buys your wine abroad. So, I mean, in Spain, of course, you have some good ID because you can go around and see people. But in abroad, you can travel, but you cannot always be in the Netherlands or in England or in the US. I mean, there's only so much time you have to visit them. So we would like to talk a little bit about what makes Rioja so special. But of course, if you think about that, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But can I say that you are in the area of the traditional producers, or is this maybe too short-minded to say? Because we will talk about some wines that we're going to taste. Yeah. And there's also some change in your portfolio now. Maybe it's not so traditional anymore.
I think we have a big diversity in the styles, you know. But in some way, we can say that Muga, in this case, Aro, Muga, Barrio La Estación, where we are placed, have a big history. In some way, we are quite a little bit classical or traditional, you know. But of course, if we see and we taste our wines, we can see the evolution. In the style of wine that we are producing in this moment. And that is very important.
And is it given by the climate change or not so much? Because recently I was in Bordeaux and then I asked them the question, do you guys change your style because the people like different wines now? And then the answer, no, well, maybe a little bit, not that much, but it's more about the circumstances that changed. And the winemaking, we also do different things maybe in the winery.
Yeah, we do. Of course, we work in a different way, but we must to know that Rioja is a very special area to produce wines.
Yeah.
Rioja is a big valley. For the people who they have never been here, I have to tell that Rioja is between two chain of mountains. We can find in the north a chain of mountains called Sierra Cantabria, and in the south, Sierra La Demanda. Between these two chain of mountains, we can find the valley of Rioja.
Yeah.
In Rioja, we find we talk about three different areas.
Yep.
You know, Rioja Alta, where we are placed, that's mean high of Rioja. South of Rioja, that we used to call Rioja Baja, but nowadays is Rioja Oriental. Yep. And in some way between Rioja Alta and Rioja Oriental, we find Rioja Alavesa also. It's important to know about that also because we find a little bit different terroir, if you want, different altitude, a little bit different influence in the climate. I said that Rioja is a special valley because we find mainly three different kind of climates. We can find from the north, because we are quite close for the Atlantic, we find the influence of the Atlantic weather. Yeah. From the south, we find from the area of Sierra La Demanda, this chain of mountains, we find also the influence of the continental weather. Yeah. And also in some way a little bit, because the Valley of Rioja is also open a little bit open to the Mediterranean Sea.
So the situation, orientation.
Orientation, yes. Yes, I agree. Then we can find also a little bit the influence of the Mediterranean weather. Yeah. Then this mix of weathers, this diversity of terroir that we find in Rioja is very special, and that give us the possibility to produce also, if you want, a little bit different style of wines. Yeah. You know,
and that because a lot of people that don't drink a lot of Rioja, but maybe sometimes, maybe have the idea that it's all the same, because, well, you have a very strong brand name as a region. People recognize the name Rioja, but the risk is that they will say, oh, everybody is the same. But if you're now describing these three subzones, there's already a big difference in terms of the climatology circumstances. So the styles will also be different for that reason.
Yes. But we can find a bigger... yes, we can find different styles in Rioja, but we must think that, of course, Rioja is well known because the people who know Rioja, they know that the main grape here, if we think about red wines, is Tempranillo.
Yeah, it's the first thing that comes to mind with most people.
Of course, also in the blending, we can find, in general, three more grapes. That's mean Garnacha. Yeah. That's mean Mazuelo, that is the same family that the Carignan grape, and also Graciana. But the main grape by far is Tempranillo.
Who has the biggest influence in some percentages?
Yeah, of course, it's the biggest influence in the blend, and that give a character to the Rioja wines. But anyway, of course, we can find a little bit different styles because we are placed in Rioja Alta. Our vineyards, the majority, not 100%, but the majority of our vineyards, they are placed also in the area of Rioja Alta. Yeah. But we have to realize that the diversity of terroir that we find in this area of Rioja is quite big.
It's already big.
It's quite big. And that gives us the possibility also to make different selection of vineyards, different selection of grapes. And that is why we can produce different style of wine. If we try our Gran Reserva, that is called Prado Enea, you are going to see that the style is, we're looking more for the finesse, for the balance, for the elegance. And that is one of the styles that we produce. Yeah. And that is a little bit the classical style of the fine wines from Rioja. Yeah. But in the other side, even if we have the vineyards in another different village, but not too far away from the village where we use the grape for the Gran Reserva, the style of Torre Muga, for example, is completely different. Yeah. Of course, the main grape is Tempranillo, but the style is different. Yeah. We're going to find a little bit more of volume, a little bit more of fruit, a little bit more of concentration. And that is because the way to produce the wine, but also because the character of the terroir, this terroir, and a little bit the style of Tempranillo, clone of Tempranillo, is also different.
Yeah.
And that gives us the possibility to produce a little bit, not too much different wines, but enough different styles.
Different options for people to choose from Rioja. And then we did not even talk about all the other wines that you make, because we have a white wine, we have a rosé wine. So there's even if you look outside, there's even more in the portfolio. There's a lot of different options to choose from. So maybe it's good for the people to understand that they can choose a lot of different Rioja. Even with one producer, there will be a lot of options to choose from. Because what I hear back, or what we talk about a lot, is about emphasis on the aging. So because of the classifications and Crianza, Reserva, Gran Reserva, people think about aging as being the most important aspect. But as you're describing right now, it's just too short-minded to only look at it like that, because the style is not just only made by the aging.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Aging can be important, of course, but the more important thing is I will say always the quality of this grape that we use to produce this wine.
And for some wines, you decide to make them only in certain vintages, and you select only certain plots because you have a standard that the wine needs to adhere to.
Yeah, our philosophy in Muga is that when we have a great vintage, because the weather is fantastic, then we have the quality we are able to produce our whole range of red wine. But when the vintage is difficult, then we prefer to concentrate all the effort to produce a good Muga Reserva.
Yeah, because this is your most important wine in the sense that it's what a lot of people buy, understand, recognize. Yeah. Is the signature.
It's a signature in our winery.
So it always needs to be available.
If we think about must be available every vintage.
So it's not like halfway down the year people sell out. No, because then you have a problem, because this is what people reach for first. So if that wine is not there, then maybe they go to another producer, because you don't want that, right? No, but I think it's important to emphasize that not every vintage is the same, of course, but also in terms of portfolio, choices are made according to the vintage as well.
Yeah, every vintage is like a new baby, you know. In some way, talking about when we produce our top wines, only the very good or the excellent vintage. And for the people who don't know too much about Rioja, but maybe they know about Champagne, a little bit the idea is similar to Champagne.
The non-vintage versus vintage.
That means the Brut is like our Muga Reserva. That means the wine that we are going to offer and that we are going to sell every year. Yeah. And the special cuvée and the millésime or the cuvée spécial is the Champagne that they only produce a very good vintage. It's a little bit the same idea here.
So it's about consistency
Rioja,
on one
Rioja
side also,
Muga.
and uniqueness. Uniqueness is not the right word, but with a millésime, you understand that every millésime is different, and it's okay, because people are looking for this unique character of the vintage. And this is what you're saying as well. With the Reserva, you don't want that. You want a person who buys now 2022 have a sort of a similar experience as he has a 2021.
Yeah.
Even though the vintage does make the wine different, it's never exactly the same. It's not like a copying machine, right?
No, in some way, every vintage have his own character. Yeah. Of course, in Muga, we try to produce our wine, and we try to keep our own personality in the style. But of course, the vintage is very important. Yeah. The character of the vintage, in general, we are going to find the character of the vintage in the wine. Yeah.
And if we talk about also the different varieties that you mentioned, about the reds, now let's focus a little bit. Is it the fact that you have these three big sub-zones, and then even in the zones you have on village level or vineyard level you have differences, that some part of Rioja might be better or more suitable for Garnacha, for instance, where you will see that the blends, or sometimes maybe even the single varietal wines that they make, is more influenced by the fact that they're in Rioja Oriental or in different parts.
Yes. If we talk about some grapes, like for example Garnacha, of course we can find a very nice Garnacha here in Rioja Alta, but in Rioja Baja, for example, Rioja Oriental, we can find beautiful Garnachas also.
Yeah.
Maybe because, I don't know, the climate there is a little bit different and is maybe a little bit better for this kind of grape.
Yeah. Oh, that's understandable because the circumstances are different.
Yeah,
Anyway.
different, yeah. Also the terroir is different, the altitude is different, blah, blah. But, for example, we like and we love the Graciano.
Yeah.
Graciano, we only find a few. The volume of Graciano in Rioja is small. It's autochthonal grape. But it's a beautiful grape to use for the blending.
Yeah.
Graciano is going to give you a wine with quite a lot of volume. It's quite powerful.
Richness.
And we like to use a little bit in the blending. When I say a little bit, it can be between 3 or 5% normally.
But you don't need to use a lot because it's powerful.
It's quite powerful. But if you go to some places in Rioja, some areas in Rioja where the weather is a little bit more warmer, here it's a little bit more colder. In this case, even if you produce 100% Graciano, can be a gentle wine.
Yeah.
You know, then yes.
So it's never the same.
The areas there, depending on the type of grape, we can find a different style of wine with the different grapes.
And if we step away only from Bodegas Muga, but look at Rioja as a region, what do you see in terms of trends, in terms of people now starting to create more single varietal wines, or maybe even single vineyard wines or village level wines? Is this something that you see happening more, or?
I think that is a very nice idea for Rioja. I believe in this idea. I believe in I think if we find the producers, even if they are small,
that they doesn't need to be big.
They don't want to produce good quality. Yeah. That is great because that makes Rioja more interesting.
Yeah.
Then the idea to find wines from village wines or South Appalachian wines like wines from Rioja Alta or wines from Rioja Oriental, for me it's a very nice idea. You know, can make make the Rioja Appalachian more interesting for the journalists, for the consumer, for everybody, I think.
I remember we had recently a tasting from the Rioja DOCA, so like from the denomination, where they bring all different wines. So we have, I don't know, about 150 different Rioja bottles, and they're selected in tables, where every table has more like a village level style or single varietal wine. And then if you have them all together, and this is events for mainly press like us, but there's also something that maybe would be nice for consumers to experience, because then you see the richness and the potential beyond what people know already about Rioja. Yeah. So the future certainly gives a lot of option for that, you would say, for the region to diversify a little bit more.
Yeah.
Would that be something for Muga as well, or not? For you have a different style. And
for us, will be a little bit more difficult, but we never know. Maybe in the future we try to
should
also
not be
to
blind
produce
for it.
Some wines from village. Why not? You know, but because if we try a wine from village. We have here in this area, we have different villages.
Yeah.
Of course, we are placed in Aro, that is one of the villages. Not too far away from here, we have another village that is called Briñas, another village that is called Villalba, another village that is called Briones, Ollauri. The character of the Tempranillo in this village,
very different.
They're not a huge difference, but they are different.
Yeah,
you know.
So why not use that?
And why not use that? Yeah.
I think it's a great example, and we're gonna taste the first wine in a moment. And I know it's a different story because it's a white one, so that's already different than what we talked a lot about red. Well, only about red basically, but now we'll go into white. But I think what you're saying is right, and we have some great examples from producers or winemakers like Telmo Rodriguez, but also Alvaro Palacios that have successful in creating village level wine or single varietal wines. I had a beautiful Garnacha from Alvaro, which is, well, I would not think that it would be coming from Rioja. I had the idea I was tasting something from Ron Valley or something like that. Yeah. And I think, well, people, if you have more of these different options, it elevates the region as a whole in the world market, I would say. So I think it's good that everybody's doing that. So let's go into first of two wines that we're tasting. And well, the first one is already a good example about things that have changed maybe over time, because we're tasting a white Rioja. Tell us a little bit about the wine and why you started producing it and when you started producing this.
Well, we have two different white wines. We have the Muga White. We have started to produce Muga White in the 70s. But and the blending in the Muga White is mainly Viura. That the Viura is the same family than the Macabe, but anyway, the Viura is a more popular white grape in Rioja. And in the Muga White, the main grape is Viura. We use also a little bit of Malvasia and a little bit of white Grenache. But the Flor de Muga is more, in some ways, a more a premium white wine. It's something new, if you want, because this vintage is the Flor de Muga 2021. But the first vintage of this wine was 2018.
Okay, so we only had a few vintages now on the market.
And what is something different in this wine? The style of this wine is a little bit more. It's more complex than Muga White. It's more gastronomic, if you want, in some way also. It's the blending is a little bit different also, because we also find in Viura, but it's only 40% of the blending. That means 30% is white Grenache, and the other 30% is white Maturana. I don't know if you know about Maturana. We only find a few. When I say a few vineyards, that means in total in Rioja, I think we can find about 50 hectares of vineyard.
Okay, in the total Rioja.
In total Rioja. But we think that the potential of this grape is fantastic, of the Maturana. In the future, we're going to find, I suppose that we're going to find more hectares of Maturana in Rioja.
And would it be suitable for single varietal?
Sorry, excuse me?
Would it be suitable for single varietal? This one?
Yes.
I don't know if
also, but in this case, we think using for the blending make the wine a little bit more complex.
Yeah. So you would say the percentage in the blend will maybe change over the time when there's more hectares, of course, as well.
Yeah, but talking.
But now we go back to the Flor de Muga.
I'm going to finish with the Maturana. If we have to compare the Maturana with another kind of grape that the people maybe know more, and we have to compare with another kind of grape from Spain, I will say that the Maturana can remember a little bit to the Godello grape.
Oh, nice.
In some way, okay? But anyway, Flor de Muga is a wine that we make the fermentation in barrels. We use 100% French oak for this wine. We are going to age 6 months in barrel. And then we are going to keep also 3 months in the big vat. To play a little bit more with the lees and to try to give a little bit more of volume and a little bit more of intensity in aroma, you know. But,
so there's at least aging there as well.
Yeah.
To add complexity a little bit and structure as well, probably. So let's taste and first cheers.
Salud.
Thank you. No, but it's nice that you. I always ask my guests to select the wine, and you wanted the white one to be part of the story as well. And I think it's important because we do see a lot of people now reaching more to white Rioja, and maybe for a while it's been there, so it's not new, but it's been sort of like I don't know, hidden secret, or for a lot of the international markets there was just not. I mean, the red image was so strong. Maybe that there was not much room for the white.
Yes, but step by step we have also a quite
now it's changing.
Nice market.
But if you go back 20 years ago,
white, even for rosé. Our grandfather and our grandmother, when they started the business, they started to produce red and rosé. That at this time the people they used to call the rosé claret, you know. But and nowadays, also the rosé is very, very important for us. I would say about 80% of our volume production.
It's also something you would not
is red, but 20% is rosé and white. You know, we are selling quite well in the export market. But I agree with you. When the people they think about Rioja,
there's other options for rosé or white that are maybe have a stronger image, but it's beautiful to discover sometimes something like this. I think it's also nice that you have to offer something else than just red wine to your business partners as well, like importers. Because if you go to a restaurant, a lot of restaurants will also say, "Oh, I always sold the red Mugas, but maybe it would be nice for me sometimes in a menu where we have a wine pairing that I can do. I can start with the rosé and then we do a white, or the other way around, and then we go to red. So it offers a lot more different picture.
Yeah, of course,
Muga as well.
it's not only because we offer a different thing, it's also because the quality that we produce and we offer is very good.
Yeah. And what's the volume on average for a vintage for the Flor de Muga at the moment? You would say?
Sorry?
The volume, how many bottles do you
How
on
many
average?
bottles? About a little bit more than 22,000 bottles, more or less.
Really not a lot if you think about exporting
Yeah.
and also is this popular in Spain as well, the white Flor de Muga? Or more for the export market?
We have started in a few years ago,
Yeah.
but we are quite happy with the sales of this wine, and we can say that around 60% is a Spanish market, domestic market, and 40% of the sale of Flor de Muga is export.
Nice, yeah, beautiful wine. And I think with Christmas coming up, it's a nice wine for a Christmas table as well.
Of course. It's more. I said before, it's more gastronomic, and I think it's a beautiful wine to enjoy with food, to enjoy during the lunch or during the dinner. You know, and something I didn't say, but something very special also in this kind of whites, not only in the Flor de Muga, also in the Muga White or even the Rosé. The main area that we use to produce this wine, the grape come from vineyards that they are placed, they're near Sierra La Demanda. That means about 35 kilometers from here. Higher in altitude, the water is colder.
So the acidity levels are different.
The acidity is a little bit higher, and also the kind of terroir is a little bit different. But because in this area it's more clay calcareous, not only but mainly clay calcareous terroir. In the area that we use for the white and the rosé is a little bit more iron clay.
Okay.
And also this kind of terroir give a little bit
different
more
touch
of not only acidity but also a little bit of a minerality that make the wine a little bit more complex.
Yeah, and you also in the aftertaste you will recognize this because it stays with you, but it gives you it's all in the end you can make a great wine, but a lot of the greatness is judged by how it leaves you when you swallow it, because then you really start to add the quality. We do reviews, we do tastings. One of the most important aspects is the last moment of the wine, not only the first one, because you can do a lot in the nose and it can even sometimes mislead you when you're smelling a wine and you think, okay, this is what I'm going to expect, and then you taste it, well, it's different. But this is a nice, beautiful example of white Rioja. And then maybe we go straight away to the next one while we are already discussing. So I will just get the glasses.
We have the next red wine is the Muga Selección Especial. That is
I will give it to you to pour.
Let me check the bottle.
Yeah, important. Well, you never know. I mean, in the end, it's a natural product. Nice.
We have, if we talk about red wines, if we talk about red wine, we have 5 different labels. So we have the Muga Reserva, it's the more well-known wine, I suppose. And then we have, if you want, a little bit more the top wines. Or we have the Muga Selección Especial. What is the difference between the Muga Reserva and the Muga Selección Especial? One of the differences is that we don't produce this wine every vintage.
Okay.
We only produce this wine the very good or excellent vintage. That means in 1 decade we can produce 7 different vintages of the Muga Selección Especial. You know. Then we have also the Prado Enea, that is our Gran Reserva, and the Torre Muga and Aro. Torre Muga and Aro, they are a little bit similar in styles. I told before, looking more for concentration, for power, for a little bit more, if you want, a little bit more rich in fruit, in aroma, in intensity of aroma.
Yeah.
That is the 5 different wines that we produce. The Muga Selección Especial is, we are very happy with this wine. And another difference with comparing with the Muga Reserva is that we call it special selection or Selección Especial because also the grape come from different vineyards. Usually we use vineyards that they are placed more in the hills, in the slopes, where the quality of the grape is a little bit better. And then we have the possibility to make the maceration a little bit longer.
So it's first a vineyard selection, and then in the cellar you also start treatment different than...
Also, because the aging time is quite similar to Muga Reserva, but in this case the quality of the oak, if you want to say that, is a little bit higher. Okay. We use 100% French oak in the Muga Selección Especial, and about 40% of the barrels that we use, they are new barrels. 60% is second use barrels, you know. And the goal in this wine, comparing with the Muga Reserva, is to try to offer a wine with a little bit more, again, a little bit more of volume, a little bit more complexity, and a little bit more of intensity in the aroma. You know.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's a 2020 vintage. In my personal opinion, the 2020 is a beautiful vintage, very fine, very elegant. Something that happened in this case is that 20 is between 19 and 21. 19 and 21 in Rioja, they were excellent vintage. And then if we think about the 18 potential of 19, 20, 21, I will say the 18 potential can be longer in the 19 and 21. But if I think about the balance and the elegance of the 2020, we are very, very happy and very, very proud. You know?
It's beautiful how you say this, that you're pointing out that the 2020 comes between the 19 and the 21.
Yeah.
I had a winemaker before that said it to me, and the reason why, I think, maybe correct me if you see it differently, why he mentioned that, because he says, well, it's logical that the 20 is between the 19 and the 21, but he says, because you have two of these great vintages, sometimes people forget about what's in between. And every vintage has its own character. So you want to emphasize on that as well. I mean, 20 is just as important as 19 and 21, but it's different. As every vintage is different. But it's beautiful to show how you can see the differences between them. And it's good because it would be, if all the vintages would be the same, it would be boring.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah,
and that is something great in the wine business, that every vintage is a little bit like a new baby, you know, a new.
Yeah. And you never know when you start how it will end up, basically. Beautiful.
And I will say 19 and 21, if we are looking more for power and concentration, maybe 19 and 21 can be better. But if we are looking more for, I love a lot to the 20 is very gentle.
Yeah.
It's very elegant, you know.
So in an early drinking window, it probably will stand out earlier better than the other two, which of course all have great aging potential. I think this is what your wines have in common. But then, nevertheless, there might be this one. If you open this earlier, there's nicer to enjoy, maybe.
I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
If we think about another appellations, other countries and other appellations, where do you think we can find the biggest aging potential in red wine? In reds?
Well, to be honest, I just come back from Bordeaux. If I would not say Bordeaux, people are going to hate me because they think that they have the best potential for that. But I'm not sure if this is going to be the one that you expect me to tell. But before you answer to me, I know that the people from Bordeaux, they came here, and this is of course a big part of the history, to make wine and help you and change the wines. But maybe you answer the question because I might be very wrong.
No. I don't know. But in my personal opinion, I will say, of course, the great Bordeaux, they have a beautiful, beautiful aging potential. I will say also, I think also about Italy, in this case about Barolo. Yeah. I think that the wines from Barolo, they have a...
Sometimes you need to wait too long even to start to enjoy it.
Even maybe too long. But anyway, a great aging potential. If you have a good cellar and you want to keep the wines in the cellar. And then I will say also Rioja.
Yeah.
I think
so you're certainly on the same...
In Rioja, we have a very good... even the 2020 is, I think, is a very elegant... even is a one that we can enjoy in this moment.
Yeah.
But... if you want to keep 15, 20 years more, it's a one that we can keep in the cellar easily. You know?
It's always going to be, and I don't like using the word better because it's not about that. It's also about changing and evolving. So some people will still like the earlier drinking window, and some people might like the later ones, and that's okay. I mean, it's not wrong or bad.
There are some people that they prefer to have the wine more fresh with more fruit. Other people that they maybe enjoy more a little bit the evolution of the wine. You know.
Do you see that changing in the market because you're also quite active on export, as we talked about? So you get preferences from all around the world that people are now looking for earlier drinking windows or more accessible wines in the
I will say in general yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because there are not too many people that they have the possibility to have a good cellar to keep the wines, unfortunately, and that is why the majority of the people they drink the wine quite quick, quite so, you know. Yeah.
And also in restaurants, because I mean, you're totally right about people that have a private storage of wine, which is very difficult, especially these days. If you a lot of people live in apartments and in the flats, and well, it's even you don't have a cellar. But in restaurants, it's a bit of the same. I mean, it's different in Spain and in Italy because you are wine-producing countries for a long time. So a lot of these restaurants still have some cellar because it used to be like this. But the Netherlands, for instance, restaurants there, they don't have space, they don't stock, they don't have old vintages. Some exceptions, but
yeah, but I think it's the same thing a little bit everywhere. You know, there are some, of course, there are some restaurants that have beautiful cellars where they have space enough to keep the wine, and they offer beautiful or old vintage wines. But in general, that happens everywhere. The restaurant, they don't have
let's talk about cash
the
flow as
right
well.
place to it's cash flow also.
Investment,
and they don't have
make.
the right place to keep long time the wines, you know.
Yeah, and it's true because
sell the wines.
you know what the thing is about wines that have the potential to age is that you would say, okay, if I could have the option to buy 20 or I don't know 10-year-old Rioja, logically thinking, it would be okay to pay a little bit more because it took time and it takes time there for his money. Somebody needs to put it in a cellar. You need to have this space, but that's not how pricing works in a restaurant or in a store. So it's a bit contradictive in the same way as when you have a great vintage in terms of quality of your wine. It's not like you're going to change your price all of a sudden because of that.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a strange thing in the wine world that sometimes it hits me that you go to a restaurant and then, it would be logical actually to ask the people to pay a little bit more for a 10 or 15-year-old.
Of course, but because to keep some years the wines is take a big effort, you know.
It's not like simple. And, but I do see that for that reason that some restaurants that do have the room and make a important point out of that they now have a different clientele because some people will look for that in terms of selecting.
In some way, I will say in Rioja, at least in Muga, in some wineries in Rioja, we try to do this kind of effort. That means we try to keep sometimes the wines in the bottle before selling the wine. That means our Muga Reserva is a wine that is going to stay at least 1 year in the bottle before we sell, we market. But if we go to our Gran Reserva Pradonea, where we try to keep in our cellar 4 years in bottle, when we think more or less that the wine is ready to open, ready to enjoy. You know?
And did you change that in terms of the aging in bottle? Is it longer now than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Or
no, in maybe 20, I don't know, 20, more or less 20, 30 years ago, we used to age longer time the wine in barrels.
Okay, so the bottle, the percentage of bottle versus barrel aging is also different, maybe.
It's also different. It's maybe a little bit shorter in this moment because the aging time in barrels are a little bit shorter also. Why? Because in the past we used to have older barrique in the cellar. Nowadays we have more new barrels. Then our Pradonea Gran Reserva is a one that we can age 3 years in barrel. If we think about the Pradoneas from the 70s or the Pradoneas from the 80s, it used to be 4 years.
So the whole concept changes for that matter. If you think about the barrel aging, it starts with there, and then a consequence of that is that the bottle aging can also change as well, because the end result, what you're looking for, is you need to think about, okay, how does this first impact to the other? It's not like only barrel; it's barrel and bottle, which makes the.
And something interesting talking about how was the Rioja wines maybe 40 years ago and how is nowadays. We can see, of course we can see an evolution. It's an evolution, and then in this case I like to compare wines and cars. That's mean how was
look at the car now or
Muga 70 or how was the Pradonea Gran Reserva 70 and how is nowadays. I think we can see that the character of our family and Muga wines is there. But of course, we can feel and we can see the evolution. It's like a Mercedes. How was the Mercedes in the 70s and how is nowadays? Of course, the design, the Mercedes is Mercedes, but the design,
the outside is different, but they focus on the same things.
The powerful is different. The safety of the car is different, you know. And that in this case, we can in the wine we can see a little bit also this kind of evolution.
But still, if people buy a Mercedes, they know what to expect.
Yeah.
And they know there will be an emphasis on luxury, for instance, and great drivability when how it performs on the road. So this is your character, your signature, on your style, and around that things can change. So it's like your core, your backbone that stays the same, and then around that there's the changes.
Completely agree. Agree. Yeah.
That's nice. I think we had some beautiful examples about how you're on one hand very traditional. So I remember at the beginning of the story when we talk about would you put yourself with the winery on the more traditional side or more on the modern side. You were a bit hesitant to answer because there's not one answer to that, because there's a lot of things you need to think about. But if you look at what we talk about now with the even with your red one, but surely with your white wines, a lot of things changed in the past 20 years. At Muga.
Yes, of course. Yeah. We used to produce in the 70s, 80s wine, white wine, with more, in this case, with 18 barrels. We used to sell crianzas and reserva whites.
Yeah.
The style was different. It was a little bit more very elegant and very nice, but more in the style of the oxidized wines, you know. Nowadays is
well, I think that's important to note because this is a different way of what people like now about white wines. That style is sort of gone out of favor. Not a lot of people drink that anymore. I mean, some top producers still do that on the same way.
Few
you
wineries
go to Burgundy, there is some good example of that as well.
Even in Rioja, we found a few wineries that they still keep this kind of wine, and for the connoisseur people. Not only connoisseur, there are some consumer that they love this style. But in general, the consumer, they are looking for different things. Yeah,
but it's nice that not everybody else just follows the same thing. And this is the thing with a region that has a strong reputation and a name as a region in the international markets. The risk is it's good because there's a brand Rioja, like there is a brand Bordeaux. But on the other side, the risk is that people have a one-dimensional view of it. And there is, as we already discussed, so much to discover. And depending on the producer, but there's so many different views on Rioja. That's nice, and I think you captured that very well. Even staying in a very traditional way of making the wine. And we started with the story about cooperage and oak, and I promised we would get back on that. So maybe we round it up and go back to that as well. I think it's like a barrel that's round. I mean, we saw the process of making it. You start with all these different wooden planks, and then in the end they become a round barrel. But it's about how the way you run the business and the wines that you make. There's all these different ingredients in terms of vineyards, in terms of styles of wine that you make, but the total is Muga, and there's a lot of ways to look at it. It's not one is only a Grand Reserva or a Crianza. It's a lot of different views on Rioja. Was there, maybe to finish it with the last question, is there some new project that you're thinking about in terms of wines that you are looking at to do, or are you happy with the portfolio as it is right now at the moment?
I think at the moment, if we think about Bodegas Muga, I can say that we're very happy. I think our portfolio is we produce everything that we want to produce. You know, we have I think a quite a different style of red. You know, the classical, the modern, the Muga that is a little bit between both styles. Then we have two different whites, two different rosé. We produce a little bit of bubbles. Then if we think about Muga. We feel at this moment
stability is good.
Quite
you
happy.
Don't need
we feel quite happy.
Yeah.
We have a new project that is going to be a new wine in Ribera del Duero, but we are going to market this wine, I suppose, end of 26 or beginning of 27.
Okay.
Then we need to wait a little bit.
And as a winery with its own facilities, of course, its own vineyards, or do you make the wine, you bring it to Rioja, or is it really 100% Ribera del Duero owned by a Rioja winery?
We have our own vineyards there in Ribera del Duero, and we have our own winery in Ribera where we are making the wine. You know,
it's interesting to hear because we did a lot of coverage on Ribera del Duero. Maybe it's a coincidence, but in the past 2 years, so we were there and we've seen a lot of things changing. And one thing I did notice is that some more Rioja producers now are also looking into Ribera del Duero as
there are some producers from Ribera that they come to Rioja. There are some producers from Rioja that we go to.
But for
Ribera.
a long time, it was like the two are very different, and they didn't want to look at each other.
Yeah.
So it was like we're on our own.
Yeah.
But now there is more crossover, maybe.
Yeah,
and not only there in Toro, for instance, there's also things happening with producer from Ribera going there, or so that let's say the borders are maybe changing a little bit, not in the appellation level, but in the producers being active in different parts.
Yeah, I agree. We decided to go to Ribera with a small project because it's kind
maybe you wanted to do something different with the company.
To produce something different.
It's good for everybody to have some new...
To have a new project that is also quite interesting for us, you know.
Well, beautiful. Thank you very much. It was a great conversation, Manu. And thanks for hosting us, inviting us, and giving us the tour and tasting.
It was our pleasure. If there are some of your customer or your people in Holland that they want to visit Rioja and they want to come to Muga.
Yeah, you're very open to visitors.
Our doors are open for the.
It's beautiful to go.
People. Yeah.
So you fly to Bilbao, or you fly to Madrid. Well, Madrid takes a little bit longer, but
Madrid takes a bit longer, but Bilbao is quite close because you need about 1 hour by car only. Yeah. That is quite close then to arrive.
And then you can experience the full Muga experience.
Yeah. I will say that the best time of the year to come, in my personal opinion, is springtime.
Yeah. So there's green in the vineyards.
Fall also is fantastic. September, October. August is not bad, but sometimes it's a bit hot. But usually May, June, September, October is a good time to enjoy Rioja. You know.
Good. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again. And let's cheers one more time with the great Selección Especial.
Salud. Gracias.
Cheers. Salute.